Welcome to my presentation titled Contractual Market Entry Modes within the framework of market entry strategies. My name is Mario Glowik, and you will find the content in more detail to read in Chapter 3 of the book Market Entry Strategies, Internationalization Theories, Concepts, and Cases. At the end of this session, we should know about major characteristics of indirect export and direct export, licensing, franchising, original equipment manufacturing, management contracts, and turnkey contracts. Let's start with indirect export. When the firm has no or very little experience in the business of foreign trade, then indirect export is highly recommendable to start with. So the firm initiates its first foreign engagement through indirect export, and this market entry mode is called indirect export because there is an intermediator acting on behalf of us in the foreign target market against the payment of a commission. That intermediator, also called commissioner, searches and develops business relationships to potential customers, importers in the foreign target market. And for the case he or she finds an importer or potential customer in the foreign target market, then there's a contract signed in between us and the importer. And usually the commissioner, the intermediator, receives payment. Everything is negotiable, but for example, the commission ranges in between 3 and 6, 7, 8, even 10% is possible of the sales, of the turnover we have fixed in a contract with the importer. So let's assume we have signed a contract with an importer in the foreign target market, which amounts 100,000 euros, and we have agreed with the intermediator, let's say a percentage of 5%. Then in this case, we will deliver the cargo valued 100,000 euro to the importer, and the commissioner will get 5,000 euros commission, which equals 5% of 100,000 euro. As I said, everything is negotiable in between us and the commissioner. That means we can also agree on a lower percentage, but also on a higher percentage, depending on the efforts the commissioner has to do in order to find potential customers for us in the foreign target country. In case we have collected already some experience, we may consider direct export. That means in this case the commissioner is skipped, and instead we have to establish our own personal relationships. So we maintain direct business ties to the importing customer abroad, and that of course requires more resources relative to indirect export because we have to travel as well as we have to actively manage the negotiations and the contracting activities. However, the big advantage is that we have first-hand information from the importer, and we are able to listen to the voice of the customer directly, and we increasingly become familiar with the surroundings in the foreign target country. So that means that the advantage and benefits from gaining valuable first-hand customer information may easily exceed the costs of active export management. And on top, we save the commission we would have paid to an intermediator instead. Carriers and banks are important participants in the exporter's business-to-business network. That means in addition to our relationship to the importer, we have to build up relationships to potential carriers, logistics firms. Usually there are also banks involved. And that means we develop corresponding exporters business-to-business network. The next market entry mode I would like to introduce to you is called Original Equipment Manufacturing, OEM. And Original Equipment Manufacturing allows the brand manufacturer a faster market entry abroad via the contracted firm than it is the case for foreign direct investments. The OEM seeks to contract a firm in the foreign target market that is able to manufacture based on the OEM's desired cost structure for assembling that product. OEM is very common in manufacturing industries, but less common in services industries. And the OEM wants to make sure that the contracted party is able to meet the technical specification and provided by the OEM, and the contract partner has strictly to follow that technical specification, and that the quality standards of the OEM's products are met. That is, by the way, the biggest risk from the perspective of the OEM, that, for example, the contracted partner doesn't meet the quality standards, and if these products then are launched to the international market, if customers start complaining, for example, related to the quality, then it will harm the OEM's brand reputation. When the OEM has found a suitable and capable firm, the contract is signed and the contracted firm starts production of quantities on behalf of the OEM as agreed in the contract in between both parties. At the end of the assembly process, the contracted firm labels the product with the OEM's original brand name. Therefore, the brand is visible on the product, and as a result, consumers usually do not realize the product is assembled by the original equipment contractor. And that is, we should keep in mind, as I already emphasized, if quality standards are not met, it will harm the reputation of the OEM. And on top, through that relationship of that contractor with the OEM, the contractor also learns from the OEM. It learns about technical specification, it learns about the manufacturing processes. That means from the OEM's perspective, original equipment manufacturing always comes along with the risk that there's a new competitor built up in the market. Okay, so the original brand name is labeled on the product, so therefore consumers usually do not realize that the product is not assembled by the OEM. However, consumers are usually charged at the same price level as before, which is called the market goodwill of the OEM's brand, as they are used to pay, and that provides the OEM additional profits. and that is also one of the reasons why the OEM as a market entry mode became increasingly applied in recent years and recent decades. It is faster than building up an own plant in the foreign target country, which serves as a second benefit, because the key is the challenge from the OEM's perspective is to find a suitable partner, but that the partner firm in the target country already operates, already has its own manufacturing capacity. So that's why the OEM saves time in building up own operations and establishing own plants. And that's why additional profits as well as the saving time made OEM very famous, or serve as major reasons why OEM has become famous in recent years. Let me summarize here in that figure related to the mutual commitments of the OEM, of the original equipment manufacturer and the original equipment contractor when they negotiate and when they fix the contract. The OEM, in terms of its resources and resource commitment, aims to provide technological expertise, share experience in terms of its manufacturing, operations, and marketing. The OEM should serve as a reliable contract partner. OEM relationships often come along with training and consulting of the contractor in terms of, for example, the manufacturing expertise or how to meet the quality standards. And last but not least, the OEM should provide a reasonable and stable volumes and operational goodwill. That means OEM business relationships should have rather a long-term perspective. The original equipment contractor, OEC, should secure quality standards according to the contract as agreed, following the technical specification. The OEC should complete the order volumes on time, should be a reliable business partner, should maximize order handling flexibility. That means if the OEM faces or increases the orders because the product is increasingly required in its markets, then the OEC should indicate some order handling flexibility. And the OEC also has to make sure that the environmental standards and labor working conditions are met, because any bad news will also harm the OEM reputation. Okay, as next, let's talk about the licensing. In this case, there's a transfer of usually protected through a patent, of knowledge or intellectual property rights, for example, a trademark, in between one licensor, the owner of knowledge or intellectual property, and one or even more licensees who use the technology, knowledge, or the trademark. In other words, the licensor grants exclusive rights to a licensee located in a foreign country to use this intellectual property for a defined purpose, for example, the assembly of a certain product, a certain period of time, can be 1 year, 2 years, or whatever is negotiated in the contract, against the payment of royalties. Also, everything is negotiable. It can be 2%, 5%, 10%, 15%, and as agreed by both parties in the contract. So the licensor is the owner of that knowledge assets. The licensor transfers but doesn't give up the ownership of the know-how. And licensing is attractive for firms which do not commit substantial resources abroad but seek fast foreign market entry. The meaning is the licensor doesn't need to build up own manufacturing facilities in the foreign target country, and instead the licensor sells that knowledge to a licensee, and through that royalties received from the licensee, also the licensor can develop additional sales, additional profits through internationalization. The licensee maintains to take the entrepreneurial risk. The licensee buys the knowledge to use a certain technology or to use a certain trademark, but at the end of the day, the licensee is responsible for operations, for hiring the employees, paying the employees, selling the products and services. And the licensee undertakes financial investments in the firm functions such as procurement, manufacturing, and sales. The licensor just sells the right to use a certain knowledge, technology knowledge, or trademark rights. On the other hand, the licensee saves R&D expenses because it acquires the knowledge from the licensor and pays a license royalty, for example, as agreed in the contract, for each unit manufactured and sold, as fixed in the contract, usually through a percentage. Licensing and franchising have various similarities. Nevertheless, franchising tends to be more complex than licensing because franchising means there's an owner of a business concept, an entire business concept, which means more than just being an owner of a certain technology or trademark. And that owner of a business concept is named franchisor. And the franchisor sells the right to use this business concept to usually many franchisees. Therefore, the franchisor provides the franchisee with the intellectual rights to start operations based on the business concept provided by the franchisor, including the business layout, including the branding, and also including training and education to operate the business. The franchisee pays a startup fee and pays operating fees. This startup fee and operating fees differ among the franchise concepts. And the startup fee is usually fixed, but the operating fees usually are calculated in percentage based on the franchisee's monthly sales performance. Also here, everything is negotiable in between franchisor and franchisee. It can be 5% or 6% or 8%. Based on the monthly sales performance. Both parties commit important resources. That means the franchisor provides sound and sustainable business concept, secures information and communication to the franchisees concerning market developments, for example, customer behavior, but also positive or best case or worst case experience in other markets, and that experience can be shared with the franchisees, keeps contract conditions, ensures training and qualification of the franchisees, and of course, a trustful franchisor charges reasonable franchise fees to the franchisees. Franchisee serve the customer first and invests all of its efforts to maximize customer satisfaction and works in accordance with the franchise contract conditions, behave according to the brand reputation. For example, franchising is very common in services industries such as fast food, restaurants, fast food chain. And you can imagine if one franchisee doesn't meet the hygiene standards, the quality standards, it immediately has a negative impact to the entire franchise concept, but also in particular to the brand and the market goodwill of the franchisor. And last but not least, the franchisee actively participate in training and qualification offered by the franchisor. Through that business relationship, the franchisor should be aware that there's a potential risk that the new competitors build up. That in worst case, one of these franchisees may modify the business concept, launches its own ideas, and build up its own business. As another market entry mode, let me introduce management contracts. Management contracts offer opportunities through which a firm uses some of its personnel to assist a firm located in a foreign country for a specified period of time, as agreed in a contract against payment of fees. So the service, the knowledge transfer recipient is seeking a contractual partner that is able to run its firm, for example, a hotel or a laboratory, for example, concerning product testing. Related to hotel business, we can assume, or let's imagine there's an investor who acquired or who wishes to build up its own hotel business, entering the tourism industry, but that investor doesn't know how to run that hotel. And in this case, that investor connects to larger hotel chains, and hopefully that investor finds one hotel being a member of these larger hotel chains, which is willing and able to support. Then they will sign the contract, and then that hotel is managed for a certain period of time by the service provider, and that service provider, usually a well-experienced, reputable hotel chain, qualifies and trains the hotel staff by providing technical, commercial, and managerial knowledge. And one day the investor may start running its hotel with own employees only, and then the contract in between the investor and that service provider running the hotel is terminated. We can also imagine, for example, there's a relatively small or medium-sized firm who develops innovative products but doesn't have the laboratory equipment because it's very expensive, and that's why that small firm connects with a larger firm and asks the larger firm for product testing in their laboratories against payment of a fee. That is also categorized within the market entry mode of management contracts. Also, in case of management contracts, we have different expectations. Let's say the ideal resource commitments, the ideal expectations in order to run the business relationship successfully and with a long-term time horizon. The contract management provider and the contract management recipient should consider the following items. As in case of the management provider, for market entry through the sales of services such as training, which should necessarily include training, qualification, and consultation of the contracted partner. The management provider should be ready and able and willing to share knowledge and business experience against the receipt of fees for its consulting and education activities. The contract management recipient takes the entrepreneur risk in terms of business performance, such as turnover and profits. Coming back to our example, the investor who acquired a hotel or who wished to establish its own hotel business, that investor takes the entire entrepreneur risk and pays fees to the consulting services provided by the contract partner. In course of time, the management recipient seeks to gain knowledge, how to run the business, knowledge provided by the contract management provider in order to make sure to gain competitive advantages for the future. For that reason, the market entry mode of management contracts from a contract management provider also indicates the risk that the new competitors build up, that we should not ignore. And last but not least, there are turnkey contracts, a market entry mode where a firm designs, plans, engineers, builds, and sells complete operations as well as supply and distribution chain services, including procurement, assembly, testing, after-sales service, including warranty support, are called turnkey or are fixed in turnkey contracts. Turnkey contracts usually are used in rather large investment activities, for example, the design, planning, construction, and building of a large energy generation plant in a foreign target country. Therefore, market entry through turnkey, among others, include the startup of operations, necessary training and qualification of local personnel, and management consulting against payment by the contract partner in the foreign target country. And one day the firm turns the key over to the locals when the payment is completely received and that payment as fixed in the contract include the startup costs for establishing, for example, the power generation plant and the usance of that plant for a certain period of time. And while at the same time, locals receive qualification and training by the turnkey provider. And one day, when they are ready and when they have the know-how to run the operations on their own, then the the turnkey contract is completed. In general, turnkey operations are attractive for firms that have, for example, specific engineering know-how and complex technological process know-how, as we had the example of power plants, but also we may consider larger infrastructure projects, building highways, bridges, running sophisticated hospitals. That belongs to the category of turnkey contracts. This is the literature, among others, I have used to develop this presentation, and what you may consider to read as well when learning more about contractual market entry modes. Thank you so much for watching, and I wish you maximum success in your academic studies as well as in course of your international business activities. Thank you for listening and watching, and bye bye.